record. And with that, good evening and welcome to tonight's presentation titled Nature's Nightshift, Nocturnal Animals with Kristen Brewster from the Center for Wildlife in Cape Neddick, Maine. I'm Brenda Harrington, Program Librarian at the Belfast Free Library, and I want to thank you all for joining us. We're pleased to continue to co-sponsor programs with Friends of Sears Island and glad we can do so virtually. I want to let you know we're doing a Q&A a little bit during the presentation, but we'll follow up at the end with other questions. So please type your questions into the chat and one of us will get to them. We ask that you please keep your mics muted. The program is being recorded and it will be later uploaded to the Belfast Free Library's YouTube page. And I believe Friends of Sears Island does so as well. So next I'll turn the mic over to Ashley Mcguire, Outreach Coordinator for Friends of Sears Island, for updates and to introduce tonight's speaker. Ashley.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us this evening for this presentation sponsored by the Belfast Free Library and Friends of Sears Island. We're really excited that you've joined us and are looking forward to hearing from the Center for Wildlife staff about nocturnal animals and meeting some of their live non-releasable animals this evening. So I'm Ashley Mcguire, the Outreach Coordinator for Friends of Sears Island, and our organization is the land manager for the 600-acre conservation area on Sears Island in Searsport. We maintain public accessibility to the island and act as stewards of the land, and we offer a wide array of educational programs to the public, like we're doing this evening. So if you're interested in learning more about the good work that our group is doing, you can visit our website and Facebook page, and if you find value in the program, and we encourage you to consider becoming a member. We rely heavily on donations and grants to carry out our mission and to continue to offer free public programming. You can join us and get more info about our group at friendsofsearsisland.org, or you can email me at outreach@friendsofsearsisland.org if you'd like to be added to our mailing list to find out about upcoming events. So we thought it would be fun to do a nature program that tied in a bit with Halloween, and a nocturnal animals program came to mind. So we thought, what better time of year to learn about the creatures that are actually lurking out there in the night. So we're excited to get started on this. So I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Brewster, who is a lead educator with the Center for Wildlife in Cape Neddick, Maine. And just a little bit about the Center for Wildlife. They're located at the base of Mount Agamenticus, and for 33 years, their facility has treated over 50,000 injured and orphaned wild animals and presented programming to thousands of community members each year. The Center for Wildlife is the largest wildlife medical facility in northern New England, servicing a 100-mile radius in both southern Maine and New Hampshire. So thank you, Kristen, for being with us, and we'll let you get started.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. So yeah, my name is Kristen. I'm one of our educators at the Center for Wildlife. So we are primarily a wildlife hospital. We're also an education building. So our hospital is actually on track for probably a record year for our hospital patients. We're tracking close to probably 2,500 to 3,000 animals this year. We've already passed our record for birds in a year already, and that was about a month ago. So we are very busy here at the Center for Wildlife, have been all summer, all spring, finally going into fall, which is finally starting to be our quieter season to give our wildlife hospital staff a little bit of a break until babies join us again in March or so. So we treat 190 species in our hospital. So that includes all of our bird species. So anything from a little baby songbird to our raptors, so our birds of prey. That's usually well over half of our hospital patients. So usually between 1,000 to 1,500 or so. Right now we're at about 1,400, give or take. So that's our biggest group of hospital patients. The smallest is our reptiles and amphibians. So that's usually only 100 to 150 or so. of our patients each year. We will take in all of our bird or all of our reptile and amphibian species, just like we take all of our bird species. Sometimes though, we do get friends that are not native, like little hitchhikers on Home Depot plants and things like that. So we will at least take them in for triage. So that basically means that we take them in overnight, give them fluids, make sure they're settled, and then send them to an exotic species specialist who can better care for them than we can. And then the last group of patients is our mammals. So we're mammals, we have hair, call it fur with our animals, but we have live babies, we give our babies milk, just like all of our other wild animals that live around here. We don't treat any of our really big mammals, so we only treat about the size of a mouse to a porcupine or a beaver. Usually a beaver we will actually triage out, so just like those exotic reptiles and amphibians, just because we don't really have enough room. We don't have a great setup for them. Of course, they do need land as well as a water feature. So we will at least take those in, but then send them off. We don't treat like bear, deer, moose, any of those really big guys. And we don't treat most rabies vector species. The exception to that are bats. We do have bat patients as well as bat ambassadors that we have with us. And they're the exception because we are a nonprofit. We don't receive any state or federal funding at all. So all of our funding comes from grants, donations, and program fees. So we are very grateful to be in the community that we are in, that have supported us for the last 30 years or so, and supported the process of making our new building a reality. When we first opened in '86, we were only taking about 100 patients a year. Like I said, that we're on track for 2,500 animals this year. So we did not have enough room in our old building. We didn't have a classroom space. We didn't have a place for all of our reptile ambassadors, so our non-releasable animals, to live so people can see them. We didn't have enough room in our medical clinic. So we moved from our 1,200-foot donated ranch house that we've been working out of for about 25, 30 years now, into this brand new 16,000 square foot facility last winter. So this new space is still very new to us. We're still kind of working out filling the new spaces now that we have the room, which is really exciting. We can have groups here finally, which you couldn't do before. Obviously, winters in Maine, when you have a little outside pavilion with no walls, if it's raining, snow, it's not fun for a class that wants to come up. So we're so excited to finally be in our new home and very grateful for our community that really made this a reality for us. So I said the word ambassador. So that's what we call our non-releasable animals who go to schools, libraries, nursing homes. Pre-COVID, we were doing it over 400 programs a year, and that was all offsite. That wasn't when we could have people come to us. So now we, of course, do have that ability, which is wonderful. They don't have to sit in the car. It's less of a long day for us as well. So great for everybody all around. We have about 30 of them in total. So different raptors, so birds of prey, mammals, as well as some our reptile ambassadors. But they have really important jobs. They help us teach about the kind of animal they are, why they're with us, and most importantly, what we can all do to help. With all of the ambassadors that we're going to meet today, we're going to talk about why they are with us and what, because most of them are human cause. That's most of our ambassadors and our patients come to us because of humans. Only a couple of them are more natural accidents and stuff like that. So most of them are humans, which means that there's always things that we can do to help. So we'll talk about each one of them when we bring them out. But our first two friends are two of our Nocturnal Raptor friends. So we have 6 types of raptors here in Maine. So we have our hawks, falcons, eagles, ospreys, vultures, and owls. The first 5 are like us. So we call that diurnal. They're active during the day, they're moving around during the day, they're eating during the day, they're calling during the day. Of course, the opposite is nocturnal, which is what we're talking about with all of our friends that we're going to meet tonight. They are all hunting at night. They are active, they're moving around, they're finding food. So some of our friends you're more likely to see than others, but they are still around. They are moving around the night. So I'll talk about each one of them because they are very unique, how they get around, how they find their food. But with that, I will introduce you guys to our first friend. So because I do have my screen here, I'm gonna have to step off the screen for just a second so I can grab each one of my friends that we're gonna meet today. But I'm so excited for you guys to meet this first friend. She's actually retired, so she doesn't go on too much programming anymore because she's actually one of our little, so she's going on 8 years old. So she doesn't go on any car rides anymore with us, but we can still use her for virtual programs, which is great. So this is Artemis, and Artemis is a northern saw-whet owl. So they are our smallest species of owl that we have here in Maine. So you can see relative to my hand, she's only about the size of my palm or so. She is fully grown. She will not get any bigger than this. They are just a small type of owl. Their next biggest cousin would be our Screech Owls, who are just a couple inches taller than her. But even though she is tiny, she's still a fierce little predator. So you can see those tiny little talons of hers. So all of our raptors, we call their feet talons. So the word raptor actually means to grab or to grasp. So you think like velociraptors, dinosaurs, they had those little grabby little hands. So raptors grab their food. They're going to use that just like a fork to catch their food, and then that sharp hook beak to tear their food up. So I do have a couple skulls here that I can show you guys. So this is a great horned owl skull on the left, and a snowy owl skull on the right. So they are both quite large. The snowies are one of the largest species we have here. The great horns are the largest ones that are here all year. You can see those big old eyes. So we call that ring that's around there a sclerotic ring. So it's basically a ring of cartilage, and that holds their eyes in place. So some of you guys may have heard that owls can turn their heads all the way around, which is not quite true. So they can do about 270 degrees in one direction and then come back straight forward and do it the other way as well. So basically directly behind them, come to look over their to their shoulder and then go back the other way and do it the other way as well. But that is related to those eyes. So those eyes take up about a third of their skull or so. So if we had owl eyes, this is how big our eyes would be. We would look absolutely ridiculous. We would have softballs or grapefruits on our human skulls, which would be very weird for us to look at. But that's how big owls' eyes are. So they are mostly fluff. So they're going to use all those soft feathers, kind of feel like a downy comforter or a downy pillow. And then on the edge of their wing actually has what's called a fluted edge, which I don't know how well it shows up. I have a picture, but on that top, there's kind of like a little fringe along the edge of it. I might have to grab the picture. Oh, nice. So this is another picture of it as well, so you guys can see what that edge looks like. So those two things allow our owls to have silent flight. So she's small. All our other species of owl would definitely predate on her. So she wants to make sure that nothing can hear her moving around. She's what we refer to as a secondary predator, which means that she hunts, but she's also hunted by our screeches, our bards, potentially our great horns. Kind of small for a great horn to go after, but they could. So all of our other owls will definitely predate on her species. So she wants to make sure that she can stay nice and hidden. So these guys in the wild are actually often seen by hunters. So they will sit, what are you doing? Yeah. Often seen by hunters, they'll sit at eye level, more or less, maybe a little bit higher, and just kind of sit there very quietly. So they'll live in tree cavities, so like woodpecker holes, stuff like that. But hunters will sit there for hours and feel like something is watching them. And then eventually they might turn around and see this little head poking up at them. What? So they are going to be very still, very quiet. They're going to sit very like mid-level in the tree. Their call kind of sounds like a car alarm. So their name, the saw-whet owl, actually came because pioneers thought that their call sounded like a grinding the whetstone, which doesn't mean anything to most of us nowadays. So it goes beep, 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 beep. And they'll do it for hours in the middle of the night when they are very comfortable, when they don't have to be too worried about predators. Obviously, they don't want to attract all of our bigger owls to find them. But that's kind of what their call sounds like. So their cousins, those Screech Owls, kind of definitely have a more creepy call because it sounds like a haunted horse whinny. So the Screech Owl call kind of sounds like it's a very creepy call if you ever hear it in the wild. But their call is more of like a car alarm. So if you guys remember last winter, that little owl that they found in the Rockefeller Christmas tree was actually a tiny little saw-whet, just like Artemis. So it's amazing to imagine that several 100-foot tree, they cut down the tree, and imagine the confusion of that tiny little saw-whet owl that was in that tree cavity, in that tree. So it was able to be released, thankfully, but it got the nickname Rockefeller before the wildlife hospital that it was at. But this is the tiny little species that was there, which is quite incredible. They're not very big. She only weighs about as much as a lemon or a spice container. So she's not big at all. She only weighs about 90 grams or so. So very, very light, very tiny. Can you show off your wings? No. So Artemis's story, she came to us in 2016 after she was with Tufts Medical Clinic for about 2 years or so. So we know she's at least 8. She wasn't an adult when she went into Tufts, however, so she could be quite a bit older. We're not really sure. But she broke her bones in her wing. So imagine she's very tiny. So those bones in her wing are only about the thickness of a toothpick. So they were able to pin her tiny little bones back together. And then they kept her for another year after that to see if she was going to regrow those feathers. So they molt, so they replace their feathers once a year or so, usually in the spring and into the summertime. But unfortunately, when she molted, they realized that just like our hair comes out of follicles, so do her feathers. And unfortunately, her feather follicles were damaged in the car accident. So she has these little nub feathers that don't grow properly. So she cannot fly silently anymore, but she also can't get around very well anyways. So she was brought to us, and she is now retired because she's actually completely blind. She went blind about 2 years ago now. So we're not really sure if it is related to her age, because she is pretty old for a saw-whet. But it also could have been a continuation of her initial injury. We're not totally sure what happened. We just know that she's completely blind now. She can't see anything. So she, as all of our owls are, of course, have wonderful hearing. But just like when humans start to lose their vision, their other senses pick up. So she already has fantastic hearing. They can hear a little mouse running around under the snow. Our saw-whets can actually hunt just by the sound. They don't actually need those fantastic eyes. So everything does sound incredibly loud to her. And she does get quite stressed out when we have a lot of kids running around and stuff like that, which is why we don't bring her on offsite programs anymore. We really only use her for virtuals and occasionally like a meet and greet on site. But she does not enjoy the classroom environment anymore, which makes sense. She's our little old lady, so we give her a nice, calm, retired life as she deserves. Right, Miss Artemis? So we'll bring out my next friend in a couple of minutes. So if anyone does have any questions, feel free, again, to put them in the chat. So I'll answer a couple questions before we move on to our next friend. I just wanted to give you guys the chance before we move on, if you did have any questions about little Artemis or saw-whet owls in general. Right. Can you look at them so they can see your eyes? And you'll see as she does look around. So right now she's kind of showing you guys a behavior that's related to her blindness. So she will kind of look and then just move her head. So it's called scrolling. So sometimes she does it when she gets really stressed out, she'll do it really, really fast. And that's when we know we'll put her away. Right now, she's just kind of hanging out. Not stressed out, just kind of sleepy. But that's one of those things. And that's why we started to notice that she did go blind. So we noticed her doing that behavior when she was spooked. But she also wasn't finding her food. So we always, as enrichment, try to move all of their enclosures around, give them new things to interact with, different perches, different areas to go in their enclosure. So as we were moving things around, we noticed that she wasn't finding them, unfortunately, which is why our vet that we partner with came in, checked her eyes out, and we confirmed that she was unfortunately fully blind. So that's why she will live with us for the rest of her old age. Nice job, Artemis. Liz and Rick asked, do birds have a sense of smell? So that's actually something that there is still some research on. Generally, no, they don't have great smell. Particularly our next friend, that's why her favorite food is skunks, because they don't have great smell. But we do actually, well, some researchers do think they might have a little bit more than we have given them credit for in the past, but I would not say it's great. With the exception to be our vulture species, so our turkey vultures and our black vultures who are starting to arrive from the south. And that's because they eat carrion. They eat animals that are already dead. So they use their sense of smell to find that food, not their eyesight. Brenda asked if they mate for life, how many babies do they have each year? So that's actually a great question, because most of our raptor species do mate for life, but our saw-whets are actually the exception to that. So they are polygamous, where most of our other species are not. So they could have several potential mates, several suitors, but of course they can only have one clutch of eggs at a time. So they will have usually 3 to 4 eggs usually. But imagine she's very tiny, so those little babies are not very big at all when they initially hatch. With all of our birds, they do grow quite fast. Even though our raptors do get a bit spoiled and to spend several more months with mom and dad, because they're finding things are moving. They're finding mice and bugs, and our bigger raptors are finding squirrels and stuff like that. Not so much berries and seeds, which are a lot easier to find. So like a little songbird, from the time it hatches to when it's on its own, it's maybe a month or so, depending on the species. But the raptors will spend several months with mom and dad, our next friend being the longest because they are the first ones on the nest around here, and actually in January and February. So with that, I will bring our next friend out. So again, I will have to scooch off the screen for a second. But if you guys have any other questions, you can certainly drop them in the comments and I'll answer them when I get back with our next friend. Great job, Artemis. Cool. So we are going from our smallest species in Maine to our largest resident species. So we just have tassel birds that are a bit bigger, but she's the largest type that would be around here all year round. If you hear them right now, they might be chatting. At least ours are around here. There we go. So this is Gaia, and Gaia is a great horned owl. So she is the largest species of resident owls that we have around here, sometimes referred to as the tigers of the night, because they have that beautiful coloration to them. But take a look at those talons. So those talons are about 10 times stronger than the strongest human. The strongest human only has about 30 pounds of pressure per square inch, where she can have over 300 in those talons. So she's very, very strong. That's why her glove is quite thick, because she sometimes doesn't quite realize how strong she is. So this is for our safety. Look at them, pretty girl. Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, so their favorite food is skunks. So she weighs about 5 pounds. She's about a third bigger than her mate Galileo. That's pretty typical in the raptor world. The girls are about a third bigger than the boys, because mom is taking care of the baby. She's the one on the nest, being that primary caretaker, where dad's job is really just to catch food, and that's about it. So she is quite large. If dad were spending all night catching the little tiny mice, he'd waste a lot of energy trying to feed him, his mate. They're young. They can have 3 to 5 young in a clutch, potentially. And so that's a lot of food that's going to be needed to make sure those babies can grow, they have enough energy. But if they find one skunk, that's going to last their family a couple years, or a couple of days, that dad doesn't have to go find food. So they are the top predator. Our local great horned owls are quite chatty right now. We have a youngster who just must have fledged. He is a juvenile. So he's kind of trying to come into the area, and Galileo and Gaia are chatting right now as well. Even though they do live in one of our enclosures, they do still talk to other great horned owls, especially if others are calling. They call back and they're like, nope, we're here. Move on, child. Even though they are very well taken care for and get fed every night. Where that wild one, of course, is on their own. I know, it's a little warm, hon. So you can see she's moving her throat muscle like that, flicking her tongue. So that is called a gular flutter. So it's basically Gaia telling me, I'm so hot. Like I mentioned, they are the first ones on the nest. They'll be on the nest in January and February, when we would never imagine being outside without our hats, gloves, mittens. Our great horned owls think that is the best time to have babies. So Gaia loves the winter time. She loves the snow. If there's not snow on the ground, she says it's hot. That's kind of Gaia's temperature tolerance, just about. Yeah. But they are the first ones on the nest because they are the largest. So they will have those babies in very early or early winter, midwinter. And then those babies will actually stay with mom and dad until next fall. So Gaia and Galileo, her mate, actually fostered a baby for us all summer long. They've fostered over 50 babies together for us, which is fantastic in the sense that I can't teach those babies what to eat, how to call, what they look like, what to look for in a mate, to be afraid of humans. So Gaia and Galileo, that's also part of their job besides coming on programs and meeting people. Galileo actually doesn't do any programming for us. So he came in as an adult, where Gaia was a baby. She was a fledgling, which is why she can do programs, but Galileo does not. Because he was an adult, he wants nothing to do with us, which makes sense. They know that they're the top predator. They know that they have nothing to be afraid of. So he kind of looks at us like, what do you want, human? So he is a foster dad, and that is his role as an ambassador, as well as a mate for Gaia to help her raise those babies. So he's been with us since 2008. He has an eye injury, so he can't see out of one of his eyes. And then Gaia has a very obvious injury. So unlike Artemis, who was hit by a car, which is something we all can do to help, just by keeping our food scraps in our cars instead of throwing them out the windows, which attracts mice and squirrels and all of their food sources to the roads. Gaia's was a more natural cause, which isn't very common within our ambassadors. So she has that wing droop down the side. And what we believe happened, she was very lucky to be in a nest that was in someone's yard, that they very safely watched the nest from a distance, watched all of her siblings fledge to go be big adult owls. But unfortunately, when all the babies left, they found Gaia at the base of the tree, unable to fly. So Gaia's wing is unfortunately stuck like that. She has no flight at all. So she has ramps to help her get around her enclosure, where Galileo is actually fully flighted. He just can't see well out of one of his eyes. So Gaia is 10 years old this year. So she's actually still pretty young. She'll hopefully live 20 to 30 years with us in captivity or so. So Galileo is about at least 15 or so. So he is a wonderful mate for her, and they live together and foster babies for us, as well as keep each other company too, which is wonderful. I know. So I'm gonna try to get her close so you guys can kind of see. So we talked about the eyes with Artemis. So those big eyes that Gaia is showing off, but you can also see these feathers on Gaia. So those are not actually ears. So if you see the black ring around her face, we call that a facial disc. So that is basically like if we were hearing with our hands up to her ears, making things a little bit louder, a little bit clearer for us. So their ears are right behind that ring, that it's going to point sound down into that inner ear. Their ears are high and low. So they have one side that's high and one side's low, and actually one's facing forward and one's facing backward, which is why they have much better hearing than we do. They can, if we were in a room, she can actually hear my heartbeat, which is incredible to think of. So that's when we imagine when we have our owls with classes, when we are in schools and on programs. That's why we do always bring up before we bring any of our owls out, reminding everyone to be nice and quiet for our friends because they are so sensitive to the hearing, like I mentioned with Artemis. But imagine if you could hear everyone's heartbeats. Like, that's really distracting, actually. Right, Miss Gaia? But those feathers are called plumicorns. Probably one of my favorite vocab words that I've learned since starting to doing this. So with our little owls, like our Screech Owls, our long-eared owls, those plumicorns are going to act as for camouflage, sorry. Sharon, Gaia just saw a picture of your cat across and she goes, what is that? Yeah. So they are plumicorns, so they are for camouflage with our little owls. So if they're scared, they're gonna stick them straight up, get really, really skinny, but please go away. Gaia, however, she knows she is the top dog. She knows she is the tiger of the night. So those plumicorns are not for hiding by any means. She's gonna show her attitude with them, and for intimidation and posturing and stuff like that. But definitely not for camouflage like our little owls would be. But we do have tufted and non-tufted owls around here, like you guys saw with Artemis. So some have the plumicorns, some don't. It's just how they are. Our barred owls, which are pretty common around here as well, are another species that wouldn't have those plumicorns. So the great horns and the bards are typically who we hear most talking. So the great horns kind of have more of a deep, typical owl call. So it kind of sounds like, I am a great horned owl. So it kind of goes like, ooh, 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 ooh. Especially around Halloween, kind of creepy. And then our bards actually sound like monkeys. They make over 100 different vocalizations. So they're the who cooks for you all call, which kind of sounds like woo, 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 woo. But when in doubt, if it sounds like a monkey, it's definitely a barred owl because we don't have wild monkeys here in Maine, of course. But they are quite chatty, especially the bards. They are quite curious as well. But our great horns right now here at the center are quite chatty as that baby's kind of trying to figure out where he's going to live after mom and dad kicked him off the territory, as our raptors do in the fall. So even though they could spend all summer with mom and dad, once fall comes, those babies goes, you're on your own, kid. Good luck. Never see you again. This is our home, our food. Bye. Good luck, kid. Right, Gaia? But Gaia gets to live with us permanently. So Ashley asks us, what is the largest animal that a great horned owl would eat? So like I said, those skunks could be 15 to 20 pounds or so. They can take food, and owls in general can take food that's 3 times bigger than them. So like Artemis is about much as a lemon. So she could take food potentially about half a pound or so. They will actually cache and hide their food like squirrels. So she will actually hide a bunch of food, let it freeze, and then go back, take it, let it defrost by taking it into her talon and tucking it up against their body. Just like how we might take meat out of the freezer, they can defrost their food as well on their own, which is why our saw-whets are able to stay here all year. So they're gonna migrate in elevations. What are you looking at? So they're gonna go from maybe the White Mountains down to the coastline, but they're not gonna go south necessarily. They're not gonna go down to the southern states, mid-Atlantic, or some of our other species that do migrate. That's typically where they, the pathways, but the saw-whets are gonna migrate in elevation, not north to south. But she would take 15, 20 pounds. So yes, that means if you do allow your cats outside without a catio or anything like that, yes, they are definitely fair game to our raptors. But one thing we always like to remind everyone on, so when you do have your cats outside, stuff like that, you are allowing them to be part of the food chain. Our raptors do not know when they're going to get their next meal, or any of our predators. So when you do allow that to happen, it's kind of, unfortunately, just part of the system, because we do not live in a bubble, even though sometimes humans like to think that we are the middle of the universe, but we are definitely not. All right, are you ready to go back? Awesome. So I have one more friend for us to meet today. So again, if you guys have any questions about owls or anything like that, you can certainly drop them in the comments. The next friend is going to take a few more, probably a minute or two to get ready. You'll see why when I come back. But I have to change a little bit before I can bring my next friends out. So I will be right back. Good job. I know. Yes, you guys can see the little getup I have right now. The reason for all of this, I'll kind of explain it before I bring them out. Thank you, Brenda. It takes a long time to gain their trust, just like our cats, our dogs, our pets. They have to trust me in order to do this job, which is amazing to be able to have such wonderful coworkers for sure. So I have a mask on, which is very specific to my friends that we're going to meet. So I only have this when I'm interacting with them. So it has no other contact with anything else. It's just their mask that I wear with them. And then the scrub is also part of that. So the mask in the scrub are because of COVID. So we are going to meet some of our mammal friends. So just like us, our mammal wildlife can get COVID. And that does include your cats, your dogs, your mammal pets that live with you. But these friends of our species that we have here at the Center for Wildlife are actually the most likely to get it. So just like we have rabies vector species, so we have species that are more likely to transmit rabies, even though, yes, technically we can get rabies, it's just very unlikely. So some are more likely to carry it than others. But these guys are very likely to get COVID from us, so which is why we are still under very strict COVID protocols here at the Center for Wildlife, because if something were to happen to the three friends I'm going to introduce you guys to, obviously we'd be devastated, as well as if any of our mammals got COVID. So our porcupine, our opossum, our squirrel, our friends that we're going to meet. So that is why I have these, but the gloves both gloves are actually just because they're rabies vector species. So we do need to wear both gloves when we are interacting with these friends, because even though they've all been with us for a very long time, if we were to say get bit and we were not wearing these two gloves and it was found that they broke skin, we would have to automatically euthanize them to test them for rabies, even though we know they don't have rabies because they've been with us for so long. So the masks and the scrubs are to protect them from COVID, and these are to protect me from potentially getting rabies from them, even though we know that that's not the case. So I'm going to be actually feeding my friends that we're going to be meeting tonight. So I'm going to get I have 3 of them for you to meet, each one at a time. They'll eat their breakfast or their dinner, and then we will meet the next friend as well. Oh, hello. If you can come first, because you have the least amount of food. So this is Betty, and Betty is a big brown bat. So I'm gonna put her on the little blanket, so hopefully she will eat some snacks for us tonight. Hello. There we go. You guys can see she's getting little tiny mealworms. Oh, you're just gonna hold it. Okay. So Betty is a big brown bat, even though she is not very big. So it's all relative to our little brown bats, who are about half the size of these guys. So they are not very big at all. Are you just gonna hold your food? So Betty has been with us since 2016. So you can see she has a wing injury right there. So she was unfortunately caught by a cat, which is why she did have to come to us. She has a broken wing that will never heal. So she can no longer fly. And that is why she's with us. All our bats around here, we have potentially 9 species that could be passing through. But our big brown bats are the most common ones that we see in our clinic. Are you just gonna hold on to it, Betty? Eat your snack, silly. I just want to hold on to it. It's not very nice food manners, Betty. But she's been with us since 2016. And her story, she was actually pregnant when she came to us, which we were not aware of. So she was very fat, and we didn't really know why at the time. So we were dropping her food, trying to get her to lose weight. She wasn't. And then one day we went in, and there was 3 bats in the enclosure. So she had given birth to twins, which is possible, but not very common, because they are having to catch all those mosquitoes to feed them. So occasionally they do have twins, but they will actually take in orphans as well sometimes, because they can potentially have 2 babies, but they will not take an orphan usually if they already have twins. You're just gonna hold your food? That's so good. Betty. I just want her to eat it so you guys can hear her nibbles. Oh, Betty. You can see those little tiny ears. There we go. And so you can see those little tiny ears that she is flexing. So she's actually vibrating right now in my hands. So that's gross. There you go. So she is using her echolocation right now to try to find her roommates. So she does live with 2 other bats, Bindi and Bobby, who the 3 of them have a little tiny colony together, because these guys would live in colonies with up to 1 million bats living together. So think of like one of those bat boxes. Those can easily hold 200 to 300 bats. But in caves, they could historically have millions of bats living in them. There we go. There we're gonna eat. There we go. Good job, Betty. So I'm gonna let her finish her dinner, and then we will meet our 2 of her other friends with us, just so we can make sure everyone gets their dinner tonight, now that Betty finally decided she was hungry. But our big browns and little browns, reds, hories, they're some of our more common ones. But these guys in those caves have been quite impacted by what's called white nose syndrome. So if anyone of you guys have ever heard that, it's basically a little fungus that was spread by spelunkers. There you go. A fungus that was spread by spelunkers who spread it through all these different caves. So it's a white fungus that grows on their face, their body. And these guys are insectivores, as you guys can see. They're eating little tiny mealworms. And so they were waking up in the middle of the winter when they were normally hibernating. And there's no food in the winter, obviously. There's no mosquitoes. I'm gonna bring out our next friend. Oh no, your nail polish is almost gone. That's not good. So this is Bobby. So Bobby also lives with them. And she is one of our newest ambassadors. So she came to us a little bit ago. We're not really sure what happened with Bobby. So Bobby doesn't have any physical injuries, well, at least visible injuries like Betty does. You can see her wings don't stick out, they go right under like they should. But we're not really sure exactly what happened. So there are a lot of things that could have potentially happened, like they could have been caught by other animals like cats like Betty. They also could have fallen as babies. So when they're in those big hibernaculums, so they're actually going to have a bachelor colony and a maternal colony. And so all of the females will actually live with their babies together. And there's actually a little baby bat daycare that all the babies will hang out together in. And sometimes on really hot days, sometimes the babies fall, unfortunately. So that also could have been how she injured herself. Her friend Bindi also has a very similar problem where she also doesn't have a visible injury, and we're not totally sure exactly what the deal was. Are you just going to hold on to your food? Like, it's kind of cold. Just like all of our mammals right now, their bodies are slowing down because they would be hibernating through the winter time. We do keep our bats awake during the winter just to make sure that we know what is going on. What is going on with your silly toes? Oh, you're not hungry? Like, I'm just gonna hold on to it. So I know we are running out of time. So I'll keep talking about our bats for a few other minutes, but if you guys have any other questions, you can certainly drop them in the comments. I want to make sure that any questions you guys have tonight about any of our friends or any of our nocturnal friends that we didn't get to meet tonight, I hope I can answer as many as possible. But I really wanted you guys to meet our bats because, of course, that's perfect for Halloween. And they are just so misunderstood. We have over 1,300 species of bats around the world. We're actually always finding new ones. Each year, there's usually at least a handful of new species discovered because we just don't know too much about them. They are nocturnal, they're flying, they're eating over 1,000 mosquitoes every single hour in the wild. They actually have a little backpack on their bum. So they are eating mosquitoes. They give us over $3 billion worth of
natural mosquito control each year. So they are wonderful neighbors to have around, and they are not like Dracula. They're not sucking their blood. They're, of those 1,300 species, there's only 5 currently who are considered vampire bats, which that means they're not found around here. They're in South America and Africa. And they are bats that make a tiny little millimeter to centimeter slit in a leg of a cow, a sheep, some sort of livestock animal. Then they are going to use their tongue to lap up about 1 teaspoon of blood. Think how much like a dog drinks water. That's basically how they're going to drink, about 1 teaspoon, and that's it. And then their saliva actually has like a liquid Band-Aid in it. So they don't want to hurt their food source. They want to make sure it's still nice and clean, making sure that the food is not going to get sick. So they're going to clean that spot, and then they're going to go on their way. For any of you guys who've ever seen pictures of baby bats, that's actually where I very truthfully believe they got the idea for Dracula from, because they're naked and they are very weird looking. So definitely where I think they got the idea for Dracula. Rachel asked, how much do they eat? How many newworms? So each bat gets a different amount depending on their weight and how they hold their weight going into wintertime. So right now, Betty is getting 5, Bobby is getting 9, and Bindi gets 18 actually. Because her 2 roommates like to eat most of the food when they are normally in their enclosures. There you go. So they'll eat, and Bindi's like, okay, guys, sure, you can have all the food. So when we have them out and feed them separately, which we don't normally do, we do try to make sure that Bobby or Bindi gets quite a few more. When I was a kid, the older kids in the neighborhood told us that fruit bats will try to land on our heads. Nope. So we actually do not have fruit bats here. They are quite large, and they are diurnal actually. So our bats are nocturnal, which makes sense because they are finding berries and not mosquitoes. So they will actually be active during the day, but they are not going to land on your head. So that is a pretty common with bats, that they are going to get caught in your hair, that they're going to fly at you. Think of like the summer night. We have a ton of mosquitoes that are attracted to us. So that's really what they're going after. They're going after those bugs that are flying around our heads. They're not going to fly they're not going to get caught in your hair, fly at your head or anything like that. Atwood asked, are owls territorial, or can they coexist with others, the same owls? Yes, they're definitely going to be territorial because they're fighting over food. There's limited resources, especially in the wintertime. So they have to make sure that there's enough food for them and their young. So they will definitely kick off babies. That's why those babies must disperse in the fall time, why mom and dad kick them off the area to make sure that there's plenty of food for them and their young for next year. I would also ask, do you keep the bats awake during the winter? We do. Because we do still use them for programming. Even our patient bats, we do keep them awake, but we do monitor their diets. Interestingly enough, so of all those animals that come in each year, we are taking all this data, figuring out why animals are coming to us, why, like we can see migratory trends as animals are passing through. But we are still seeing bats being awoken in hibernation. So 20 years ago, we were not getting bats being woken up due to climate change. But on those warm days, we are now seeing that. We usually have to overwinter usually about a dozen or so bats during the winter time that get woken up from hibernation. But of course, when that happens, there's no food. So if they're not brought to a wildlife rehabber, they will starve because of course there's no mosquitoes out during the winter time. But we do keep ours awake. With our patients, actually, one of the new things in our new building, we have what's called a bat cave, which is basically a huge, big mesh enclosure that we can fly our bats in during the winter time. That's inside. Before we were in this new building, we have boxes that our bats will be in that are probably about a foot by foot by foot or so. And that's fine when they're injured, when they're patients. But unfortunately, with our bats that get overwintered, that means that in our old building, they were not able to fly all winter because we had nowhere to fly them. So now we can fly them during the winter time, which is really important so that they are continuing their muscle conditioning, making sure they're not losing that muscle. Just like us, if you don't exercise enough, you're gonna lose that muscle mass. So that's exactly the case with these guys. And we would have to keep them for much longer because they couldn't go outside until it was warm enough. So we had to wait until it was warm and then they could start going outside to be conditioned for flight. But now we can fly them all winter long, and then they can be given a week or so to acclimate to the temperature in the spring, and then hopefully are able to be released as soon as possible in the spring. So many great questions. I'm gonna let Miss Bindi finish her snack. She has a couple more. But thank you guys so much for having us today. Thank you so much to Belfast Library and Sears Island, the Friends of Sears Island. Oh, you didn't want that one. For having us. This was awesome. So thank you guys so much for having my friends and I.
Kristen, thank you so much for being with us. That was really interesting, and I'm amazed at your ability to multitask and give a presentation while holding and feeding wild animals. So.
Yes, I'm amazed at that too. Oh my goodness, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's like everyone's got to eat. Got two more, Bobby, Bindi, and then we're going back.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so Bindi's story is pretty similar to Bobby's. We're not totally sure exactly what happened. She doesn't have any physical, like obvious injuries. You can see her wings look totally fine. So we think she was either caught by an animal, maybe fell as a baby. We're not totally sure. We just know that she cannot fly. Good job, Bindi. And since she did come to us in COVID, she's still getting used to all of this still. Oh, thank you, Linda, and Carolyn, and Sharon. Thank you. I'm so glad you guys were able to all join us today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say bats are a lot cuter than I thought they were. I have never seen one that close. So.
Yeah, they're so funny. It's like we bring them out and they're like, that's a big brown bat. And like, it's just relative because their cousins, the little brown bats, are half the size. She's only right now at her chunky winter weight, about 20 grams. So the little browns are half. They're less than 10 grams normally.
Wow.
And that's a chunky bat during the winter time. Normally they're like 4 or 5 grams. So not very much. Like all the food's gone. Now we have places to be. There you go. Can you show off a little bit? No. Yeah, so of course they're gonna hang just like that in the wild with their tiny little feet being hanging upside down. Like, all the snacks are gone. I got places to go, guys. You're welcome, Rachel and Dell. Good job, Bindi. Oh.
Looks like she's smiling for the camera.
Oh. Like, oh, what's that? It's been so funny in COVID seeing all of our animals like reacting to seeing themselves in the screens. Between the virtuals and like our Facebook like lives that we've been doing, Like they started to be able to see the screen, and especially like our vulture, our raven, our falcons, they're just so interested in what's going on like with themselves. Because the smarter intelligence ones do have like self-recognitions. They can look at a mirror and see themselves. So it's been very interesting to see like them interact with the computers.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Good job, Bindi. Ready to go back? And cuddle session. Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen. That was really wonderful. Giving the comments, everybody really loved it. So thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take care. Thanks again.